9 Russian vehicles, including 2 fuel trucks, 1 ammunition carrier, and several armored vehicles, can be stopped in less than a minute by drones that cost only a tiny fraction of the convoy's value. That is the warning now coming from southern Zaporizhzhia, where one Russian logistics column reportedly moved along a dirt route with tight spacing, steady speed, and almost no sign that danger was already above it. This was a glimpse into a larger problem for Russia's war machine, because Ukraine is turning supply routes into watched corridors, where every turn, every gap, and every slowdown can be measured before the first strike lands. A reconnaissance UAV is used to see the convoy, route its direction, and pass the timing to an FPV team waiting near the right choke point. Then the trap begins. Once the moment came, FPV drones dive down and thick smoke appears on the road. Within seconds, both the advance and the escape route can become dangerous. The risk is bigger than losing vehicles. If fuel, ammunition, repair teams, and transport vehicles cannot reach the front, Russian forces ahead may lose the tempo needed to keep fighting. And this story goes even deeper. Ukraine is now exploring ways to push drones farther into Russia's rear areas to bring attacks closer to ports, ships, and support hubs. So what really happens when a convoy is seen first, trapped second, and cut off before it can escape? The Russian convoy was marked before its crews understood that the road had already become part of the battlefield. In southern Zaporizhzhia, a logistics column moved out from what appeared to be a safer rear area, carrying the kind of supplies that keep a front line alive. Fuel trucks, an ammunition vehicle, and several support vehicles rolled forward in a tight order, and nothing about the movement looked dramatic from the ground. For the drivers, this likely felt like a routine supply run behind the forward positions. The engines held a steady pace, the vehicles stayed close enough to keep visual contact, and the column followed a dirt route that had probably been used before. That kind of order can look safe to the men inside the convoy, because every vehicle knows where the next one is, and no one has to slow down to search for a new path. But from above, that same order created the first weakness. A convoy that moves with steady speed and even spacing gives the enemy something more valuable than a target. It gives a pattern. The road, the gaps, the direction, and the weight of each vehicle begin to form a moving picture that can be read, measured, and passed to another team. A Ukrainian reconnaissance UAV entered the area quietly and stayed long enough to capture the basic shape of the column. It did not dive. It did not fire. It did not make the crews scatter. Its job was simpler and more dangerous. It watched which vehicle led the movement, which truck carried heavier cargo, where the line became tight, and how the drivers handled turns on the dirt road. That short look mattered because the convoy was not only a group of vehicles, it was a supply chain moving in the open. A fuel truck was not just a truck. It was future movement for armored vehicles near the front. An ammunition carrier was not just cargo. It was the next round of fire for units waiting ahead. A support vehicle was not just part of the line. It could be the difference between recovering a damaged machine or leaving it on the road. The UAV did not need to stay overhead for long because the convoy's behavior gave away enough information. The spacing stayed controlled, which meant the drivers were trying to preserve formation. The route stayed predictable, which meant there were limited safe options nearby. The vehicles did not spread out across multiple tracks, which meant a narrow point ahead could become decisive if one truck stopped in the wrong place. At this stage, the battle had already begun without smoke or fire. The Ukrainian side did not need to rush into the first possible strike, because a quick hit on the wrong vehicle might damage one machine while the rest escaped. The better choice was to turn the convoy into a timed sequence, then wait for the moment when the road itself would help finish the trap. Once the UAV confirmed direction, speed, and spacing, the convoy stopped being a hidden movement and became a schedule. The Ukrainian operators kept watching the feed as the convoy moved closer to the narrow section ahead. A short update came through. The route was confirmed, the spacing was still tight, and the vehicles were holding the same direction. The FPV team then waited for one more signal, as the column had not reached the best point on the road, and the trap would only work if the strike landed after the vehicles fully committed. The FPV team did not strike the first vehicle because the first visible target was not always the best target. After the reconnaissance UAV passed the route data forward, the operators waited for the convoy to enter a narrow stretch where the road would do part of the work for them. The goal was not to create the loudest explosion. The goal was to stop the column at the worst possible place. The Russian vehicles kept moving toward the choke point with the same tight rhythm. A fuel truck stayed near the front, an ammunition carrier moved deeper in the line, and several armored vehicles held close as escort. From the ground, that spacing helped the drivers stay connected. From the FPV team's view, it meant one strike could force every vehicle behind it to react at once. The road ahead was hard in the center, but the sides looked weak and uneven. That detail mattered because a heavy vehicle could not simply swing wide without risk. A BMP-3 trying to leave the track could sink into soft soil, break its movement, or expose its side armor while turning. The convoy was still moving, but the road was already taking away its choices. The Ukrainian operator held the drone a little longer. If the FPV launched too early, it might hit one vehicle while the rest pushed around the damage. If it came too late, the convoy could clear the narrowest point and regain space. There was only a small window where the middle of the column would be inside the trap while the rear vehicles were still committed to the same lane. Then the FPV lifted and came in low. It did not climb high enough to give the crews a long warning. It stayed close to the terrain, cutting across the road at an angle that made the approach difficult to track from inside the vehicles. The target was not the lead truck. The drone aimed for a vehicle closer to the middle, where a sudden stop would split the convoy's movement. The impact hit hard enough to disable the vehicle, but it did not need to tear the whole convoy apart. A damaged ammunition carrier stopped in the lane, smoke began to rise, and the driver behind it had only seconds to react. The front vehicles slowed first. The rear vehicles kept rolling for a moment longer, then closed the gap too quickly. That short delay created the collapse. A line that had been moving with order turned into a compressed knot of engines, smoke, and confused signals. Drivers could not see the full picture. Some looked forward at the blocked lane. Others checked mirrors, tried to reverse, or waited for a command that did not arrive fast enough. The convoy still had armor, fuel, and manpower, but it no longer had clean movement. That was the real damage from the first strike. A logistics column is dangerous when it keeps moving, but it becomes vulnerable when each driver starts making a separate choice under pressure. At that moment, the Russian crews faced three bad options: push forward and risk hitting the disabled vehicle, reverse and expose the rear of the column, turn off the road and gamble against soft ground, mines, and another drone. None of those choices restored control. So the question becomes simple. If you were commanding that convoy, would you order speed, wider spacing, or a full route change the moment the first drone appeared overhead? The convoy's first attempt to save itself made the trap tighter, because every movement now happened inside a road space that was already watched. After the first strike stopped the middle of the line, the rear vehicles had only a few seconds to choose what came next. Some drivers tried to hold position, while others started searching for any gap that could let them escape the blocked lane. One Ural fuel truck near the rear tried to edge toward the shoulder, hoping to pass around the damaged vehicle ahead. The move looked simple at first, because the dirt road still had a thin strip of open ground beside it. But the truck was heavy, the soil was loose, and the driver had to steer through smoke while other engines pressed close behind him. The wheels began to dig in, then the truck leaned slightly as the shoulder started to break under its weight. That failed turn changed the shape of the whole convoy. Instead of creating a bypass, the fuel truck became another obstacle on the side of the route. Vehicles behind it could no longer move straight forward, and they also could not pass cleanly around it. The narrow road became even narrower, and the drivers who still had working engines began to lose the few options they had left. Behind them, a BTR-82A tried to reverse to open space for the trapped vehicles. The crew had armor, speed, and a working engine, but none of that solved the visibility problem. Dust from the road mixed with smoke from the first hit, and the driver could not see far enough behind to move with confidence. He backed up slowly, then stopped, then tried again as voices crossed over the radio. That hesitation was exactly what the Ukrainian teams were waiting for. The first FPV strike had stopped the convoy, but the second layer of the ambush was built around what the Russians would do after they realized the road was blocked. The operators did not need to chase every vehicle. They only needed to watch the places where a desperate driver was most likely to go. Near the withdrawal route, another FPV had been placed low and silent, waiting close enough that it did not need a long flight. Its engine stayed off until movement came toward it. When the BTR-82A began to reverse again, the drone lifted from cover and rose into the vehicle's path. The crew had almost no time to react because the threat did not approach from the open sky. It appeared from the direction they were trying to use as an escape. The impact hit the rear section and stopped the vehicle in place. It was not the largest explosion in the attack, but it was enough to cut the column's last clean exit. The rear was now blocked, and the vehicles in the middle were caught between a damaged carrier ahead, a stuck fuel truck on the side, and a disabled armored vehicle behind them. Inside the convoy, order began to break into separate decisions. One driver tried to angle toward the shoulder, another waited for the road to clear, and a third kept the engine running without moving. No single command could quickly restore the formation because the road no longer allowed the convoy to act as one body. This was the moment when the ambush changed from a strike into a cage. The first drone had broken the movement. The second one punished the escape. From that point forward, the Russian convoy was no longer trying to complete a supply mission. It was trying to survive inside a small kill zone where every possible direction had already been watched. Russian air defense was forced into a race it could not control because the convoy had already lost movement before protection could fully react. Once the vehicles stopped and compressed inside the narrow road, systems like the Tor M2 and Panzer S1 had no choice but to engage multiple small threats at the same time. From a technical point of view, both systems are designed to track and destroy low-flying targets, yet the situation they faced was not a clean engagement. The first radar contacts appeared fast and low. A Tor M2 vehicle positioned behind the convoy began tracking incoming drones, and the crew launched its first interceptor within seconds. One target dropped, then another followed, and for a brief moment the defense seemed to stabilize the situation. Inside the system, everything worked as trained, scanning, locking, firing, and confirming. But that moment did not last. Each engagement required a full cycle, and each cycle took time. While one drone was being tracked, another one was already moving closer. While the crew focused on a target in front, a second drone approached from a lower angle that was harder to detect. The problem was no longer about accuracy. It was about how many decisions had to be made at once. A Panzer S1 nearby joined the response and opened fire with short bursts. The system could cover a wider area, and its guns gave it a chance to react faster against close threats. A drone was hit and fell near the roadside, but the next one came in at a lower height, almost skimming the ground. The operator caught it late, and the turret turned, but the timing was already off. That delay was enough for the drone to reach its target. It struck near the vehicle, sending dust and fragments into the air. The damage did not destroy the system, but it disrupted its awareness. The radar feed no longer aligned perfectly, and the crew had to take a moment to adjust. In a normal situation, that pause would not matter. In this situation, it created a gap. The next wave did not attack from the same direction. Ukrainian operators changed angles, sending drones from positions that forced the air defense to keep shifting its focus. Ukraine could then shift to a drone swarm plan, sending several drones into the same defended space at nearly the same time. Some drones climbed just high enough to pull the radar upward, while others stayed low near the road edge. The Tor M2 or Panzer S1 could still destroy some targets, but the swarm changed the timing. Each drone demanded a separate reaction, and every turn of the turret opened another angle for something smaller to slip through. The system was not facing one attack path anymore. It was facing a moving circle of pressure. Then one FPV reached the defense vehicle from the side and struck close to the radar section. A second drone followed almost immediately, hitting near the launcher or rear equipment area. The blast did not need to completely destroy the system to matter. It only needed to damage sensors, shake the crew, or interrupt tracking at the wrong second. After that, the convoy's protection became even thinner. The air defense was still present, but it was no longer controlling the sky around the blocked vehicles. Ukrainian drones now had more room to approach the trapped column, and the Russian crews on the road could hear the difference as the next wave moved in. The sea drone opens a new part of the same battlefield because it moves the pressure from a dirt road in Zaporizhzhia to the water routes behind Russia's war machine. On land, Ukraine can trap a convoy by watching its movement and striking at the right choke point. At sea, the target is different, but the method is familiar. Find the route, close the distance, reduce warning time, and hit before the defender can fully react. A Russian port or coastal support area may look safer than a road near the front, but it also depends on routine. Tankers need loading points. Patrol boats need repair docks. Fuel systems need pipes, pumps, storage tanks, and crews working on schedule. When a sea drone enters that space, the danger is not only the explosion. The danger is that a rear area built around order suddenly has to react like a frontline position. The attack can begin quietly. A sea drone moves low across the water, using darkness, distance, and the shape of the coastline to reduce detection. It does not need to move like a missile. It only needs to keep coming until the target has too little time to adjust. A vessel near a pier, a fuel terminal, or a harbor entrance cannot always turn freely. In that moment, the water itself becomes another kind of choke point. The defenders then face a difficult problem. If they focus on aerial drones, the sea surface becomes dangerous. If they scan the waterline, another threat may appear from above or from a different direction. A Panzer S1 near a port may be forced to track several small contacts at once, while crews on the ground try to understand whether the main danger is heading for a ship, a fuel tank, or a docked support vessel. A sea drone strike does not need to sink a large ship to change the situation. Hitting a patrol boat can reduce security around the harbor. Damaging a tanker can delay oil movement. Striking a pier or a fuel point can slow loading and force emergency crews to move equipment away from the water. Even a failed attack can make Russian forces spend more time checking routes, moving vessels, and guarding areas that once felt routine. This is why the Sea Drone campaign connects directly to the convoy ambush. In both cases, Ukraine is not only looking for destruction, it is looking for interruption. On the road, one disabled vehicle can stop fuel and ammunition from reaching forward units. At sea, one strike near a port can disturb shipping schedules, repair activity, and fuel movement across a wider area. The psychological effect also matters. A Russian driver on a dirt road fears the low sky. A ship crew near a harbor now has to fear the waterline. A logistics troops must think about roads, depots, ports, tankers, and support vessels as parts of the same vulnerable chain. That makes the rear feel smaller and less protected. By this stage, the battlefield no longer has one clear edge. The front is still where soldiers fight, but the pressure now reaches the routes that feed them. From Ukraine's side, the message is clear. The next target may not be the biggest ship, the largest depot, or the most defended port. but the single point that keeps the whole route working, because breaking that point can force Russia to slow down, reroute, and protect every movement that follows. One trapped Russian convoy in southern Zaporizhzhia may reveal something bigger than one failed supply run. It shows how a force can lose value before it loses every vehicle, because movement itself has become one of the most hunted targets on the battlefield. The convoy was destroyed from front to rear. Once the middle of the line stopped, the rest of the formation began to collapse around it. Yet the sequence after that is the real damage. Fuel could not move forward. Ammunition could not arrive on time. The front line did not need to break instantly, because the supply rhythm behind it was already being slowed. Ukraine's method is also becoming wider than one FPV ambush on a dirt road. Reconnaissance drones, FPV teams, swarm pressure, and the recent sea drones strategy are all pointing toward the same battlefield logic. Careful watch, patient timing, calculated strike to force Russia to react after the trap is already closing. The next phase remains uncertain. Russia may respond with stronger EW, more short-range air defense, wider spacing, and less predictable routes. What matters next is whether Russia can protect movement faster than Ukraine can hunt it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this breakdown was useful, hit like, share it, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis on the weapons, battles, and geopolitical shocks shaping today's war.